So I think we might be ready to start. And I will keep an eye on the participants window in case anybody else joins, and I can admit them. So welcome everybody. This is Take the Lead, which is sponsored by Berkshire Children's Chorus, and we are a children's chorus in the Berkshire region of Massachusetts. We serve children from early ages, even from first grade all the way through 12th grade, and we have 3 ensembles. We have a high school girls ensemble. We have a 5th grade through 9th grade ensemble, and we have a young training choir for the youngest singers, and that gets them ready for the bigger ensembles. So we've been around for 30 years now, and I think we're expecting our founder to join us at some point, Nancy Loader. And a lot of us on this call were actually singers in the chorus at some point, or are currently singers in the chorus. And then we also have some guests from UMass who are students in the education school. So welcome to all of you. This is a program that has been designed for the Berkshire Children's Chorus community, both current singers and recent graduates. And we welcome alumni and board members and family members as well. And it's part of our kind of, this is something we actually started early on this year before COVID happened. But we think that this could actually be useful to us as we have suspended this season. And we don't want to lose touch with our singers. We want to keep our community connected, and we want to continue to deliver on our mission. So I'm a board member with the chorus, and we have a couple of board members here. If anybody, all our board members, you could raise your hand. And then we have some past board members as well. And so our board has looked to this program, and we're developing this program as a way to continue delivering on our mission, which is to provide students with musical experiences that develop personal and artistic excellence, support the growth of positive values, and enrich our community. And we figured there's no better way to do that during this time of separation and COVID than to reach out to our alumni and reach out to our community and see what we can learn from them and how we can inspire our current singers and our recent graduates with the stories of past singers. So our first guest is Dani Dillon, and she is a graduate of the chorus, I think from 2008. I'm a graduate from 2006. My sisters are here, they've both graduated. Mary Shalaby is here, she graduated. We have a couple of young singers here. So this is really something that we're all excited to be a part of, and we wanted to hear from Dani today because she's had a very exciting career in New York. And let me just go to our bio of Danielle Dillon.
I was going to say, like most people in this room call me Danielle, which is really unique because a lot of people in my other world of my career call me Dani, so it's very funny to be in front of a group of people that I'm Danielle too. But either name works, really, whatever you want to call me.
So our Danielle is a proud alumna of Berkshire Children's Chorus and graduated from Mount Everett in 2008. She's worked in restaurants and hospitality for most of her life, from Michelin-starred fine dining to multi-unit international food and beverage operations at scale. Dani has always loved the way that personal, story-driven food can connect people in profound ways. Her work has been covered in Vogue, Eater, and Food and Wine, among other publications, and she's collaborated with many celebrated chefs and makers through her work at companies like The Wing and restaurants like Lavara. This year, Dani started Lunch Group, an operations, curation, and impact consultancy for mission-driven food and beverage businesses, to focus on reimagining the systems of service and hospitality, especially in light of the pandemic. She works with companies across the industry's ecosystem who want to lead authentic change, whether that change is within their communities, through their collaborative partnerships, or within their organization. So thank you so much for being here, Danielle.
I am
You're
so
welcome.
honored to be here. I was really excited when you reached out to ask me to do this because I love doing digital events. I think it's a really fun way to get to spend time with a bunch of people, even though we're all in different places. And I am such a proud alumna of Berkshire Children's Chorus in Coda. So really, really special for me to get to be here with everyone tonight.
So I have some questions prepared for Danielle, and we are also going to save some time for questions from all of you. So if you have questions, you can save them till we have the question and answer period, or you can send them in the chat box. You can send them just to me, or you can send them to everybody. And then when we get to appropriate time for them, I can call on you and you can ask your questions with your own voices, or I can also just read them for you. And other than that, I think we're ready to get going. We also have a treat for all of you participants today that Dani has prepared. So we'll be sharing that out in a little bit. It's a recipe plus some extras. So we'll share that soon. So I wanted to just ask, let's set the stage a little bit. I was thinking about Danielle and how it's been only 12 years since she last sang in the Berkshire Children's Chorus, but those 12 years have been packed full of interesting work and interesting learning. And I know that when I was 18, I couldn't imagine being 30, which is what you are now.
Yes.
And I had no idea what I would be doing. So I know that you are still very young, we're young, and we're still going to go do lots of things. But I'm going to be kind of asking you questions as a wise old sage today. So you can tap into what you've learned in those 12 really important years and think about what might be useful for young singers or young high school students to think about in these coming years. Does that sound good?
Yes, I'm really excited for it.
All right. So I wanted to start by asking you, where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? And when did you join BCC?
Really good question. So I grew up in South Egremont, and I went to school at Mount Everett. So first Under Mountain and then Mount Everett. And I joined BCC. I actually fact-checked with Maddie, just for accuracy. I joined BCC late. I was like a late joiner. So we're pretty sure I joined Coda as a 10th grader, as a sophomore. And actually, when I was thinking about it, I'm pretty sure I joined chorus just in general in freshman year. That was the first time I joined a chorus at all. And it was Nancy's chorus at Mount Everett, just as a high school student. It's the first period of the day. And I loved it. I ended up joining a lot of the other choruses that Nancy had started at Mount Everett. So Madrigals or Retro or all the sort of smaller groups that met. And then I started with Coda and Berkshire Children's Chorus when I was a sophomore. My sister got there far before I did. She started earlier. But yeah, that was when I first joined the chorus.
I also was a late bloomer and only joined Berkshire Children's Chorus when I was in 10th grade. And Maddie, my sister, joined much earlier. So I don't know what we were doing.
Like the older sisters just don't get the memo to join.
Yeah.
Like, what is this?
So what was it that made you join Berkshire Children's Chorus?
That's good. So that's also, I think when I was a freshman and I was in like the normal course, and I loved at Mount Everett, and I loved Nancy and I loved her energy, and I also just loved the atmosphere of being in chorus. I think I had all my friends were in it. My best friend Maddie was in it. All like my closest friends in the world were in chorus with me, and my closest friends in the world were also part of Coda, and were like, you should join this. You know, I remember Maddie went to England when she was a freshman, and I was so jealous that she went there, and I was like, oh, like I want to go on fun trips, and I want to be part of this really cool separate singing group. And so that was really what inspired me to join, and I have so many great stories and experiences from it.
So what are some of those highlights in those 3 important years?
Yes, we definitely, one of the biggest highlights was coming to New York, and it's now where I live. I went to college in New York City, but I remember going to sing at Carnegie Hall was a really special moment for all of us. And we also had a little documentary film made about us around that time too, which I loved. Had the best time, like living my biggest TV star, movie star fantasies through that documentary. And so that was a big one. But also when I was thinking, you know, I was thinking about my time in chorus, and I always loved doing the galas. That was so much fun because it felt like we would go to a fun castle. I don't even know where that was, but it felt like a castle, and we would just go wear beautiful dresses and we get to sing, and it was just the most lovely evening. But really any of the concerts that we did, because I think, we worked so hard on the music and as a group, and that anytime we got to perform and share that with our parents and our loved ones in the community, that was always really special. And I have a lot of great memories from those venues, whether it was, the synagogue where we sang that song, Al Shlosha, or whether it was like these really amazing, like big shows in churches, which had the most amazing acoustics, or like nursing homes, which were always really special because people loved music in those settings. So yeah, those are all really fun memories.
So at Carnegie Hall, what did you do there?
Great question. So I know I can't remember anything. We sang a piece of music, which name escapes me. If you know this piece of music, please share that in the chat. But we were with a really acclaimed director. Was it Leonard Bernstein?
No, it was John Rutter.
John Rutter. I have a terrible memory. And yes, Henry Leck. But John Rutter was the director who directed us, and it was a bunch of different schools coming together. We were one of the choruses that were represented, so a lot of either local choruses. And that was a really amazing experience because it was not only bringing together all these different choruses from across the country, but it was also all of us learned the music separately, and we got to kind of come together as one big super chorus to sing at Carnegie Hall, which was just, of course, one of the most incredible spaces to sing in acoustically, and just the experience of getting to sing at such a special venue was really, really powerful and impactful.
And we were all fangirling for our old conductors for that event, I remember.
Oh yes, we definitely were. But I was right. We sang Bernstein, but it was conducted by John Rutter. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Maddie. Maddie has a better memory than I do, so really important she's here.
So something's going on with my Zoom, and I'm also trying to make sure that Nancy can get in. So do you remember any special pieces that you just mentioned, Ashlo Shah, but I think one of the cool things.
Yeah, so that one I remember, it's funny because I feel like I remember a lot of bits of songs. I probably couldn't tell you all the names of them, but I certainly sing a lot of them still, like in the shower. Like I'm always singing Johnny Said No. I don't know if that's a Coda song. That
yes,
was another song that weekly. Al Shloshah, I sing probably weekly, interestingly enough, in the shower. It's a really phenomenal shower song. And I think a lot of the one we entered into every holiday concert with the candles, that song.
Hodie.
I hope that song, yes. That song is something that I think about all the time. But also like a lot of the really classic pieces of music too that we sang, those ones by these like great composers, those ones I always remember and think about. I think did we do Handel's Messiah? Yeah, so that was one that I think about a lot. I remember actually doing that in college. I remember that, and I knowing that piece of music and recognizing it from having done it with BCCs and with Coda, so yeah.
I like how you've mentioned a lot about how the traditions of Berkshire Children's Chorus are really important. And you talked about the gala, which was our annual fundraiser, which is now a spring house concert. And then the kind of repetition of the songs that we always sang at the holiday concert and everything. And I think that still is important today. All of these traditions might not be the same, but that's what makes this have meaning for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I loved that I could probably go back to one of these shows and recognize either pieces of music or moments that happen. I think there's a lot to be said about how beautiful the ceremony is with concerts and with song. Just I remember the idea, everyone's sitting and you have the chorus come on and it's quite hushed, and then they all zoom in and focus on the person who's conducting. And just that moment's a very almost sacred moment, a very special moment. And I love seeing that. And that's not just unique to our chorus, but it's something that you see across all singers and all choruses. I love to recognize that energy.
So let's zoom ahead a little bit to what you did after high school. You went to Barnard and studied art.
I did.
So yeah. What were you thinking when you were 18, leaving high school in Berkshire Children's Chorus? What were you thinking you were going to do?
Well, I knew I was very excited to be moving to New York City. And that was a very special moment. Both of my parents are from New York City, from Washington Heights, and growing up, we spent a lot of time coming down to the city to visit my father's mother, my grandmother. And so I'd spent a good amount of time over the course of my childhood coming to New York City, but it was the first time where I knew I would be living there as an adult, or as a young adult, really. And I left Mount Everett having been someone who did a lot of performance art, like doing theater and doing singing, and really loving, philosophy and studying. When I got to Barnard, I thought maybe I would do something like that. I would do something with philosophy, or I'd do something with, probably maybe theater. And I ended up actually, like the second or third day I was there, getting a job. I was a work study student. So part of my financial aid for Barnard was getting the opportunity to be, paid by working at the school. And so I got a job in the art history department. Just because they were looking for someone to work there. And that's where I started to meet all these amazing art history professors. And I spent a lot of time working with them. And from there, ended up taking classes and ended up loving it, because I felt that it was an intersection of all the things I loved, right? There was philosophy, there was a real academic rigor to it. But it was also quite beautiful and visual, and so many interesting things feed into art, whether it is performance or theater, or whether it is painting or sculpture or collage. I loved that piece of it. It was really dynamic. And so that's what I ended up studying. I ended up doing my thesis in studio art specifically. So I did oil paintings, and I did a series of large-scale oil paintings for my senior thesis, and worked in art galleries and got to spend time in museums. And, I think about that now, like I think, where I was when I was 18 versus where I ended up at the end of college. And I didn't see the connections at the time, but definitely everything I've done is sort of built on itself in a way. And I see a lot of my experience, whether it's singing or whether it's in theater or whether it's in art, kind of play out in what I do now professionally.
So how did you get to now working in restaurants and building out kitchens? It's not just that you work in restaurants or that you cook in a restaurant. You put together kitchens, you build teams to work in those kitchens, you build menus. So how did you get to there?
Yeah, great, good one. So I think all through when I was one of my first jobs was working at Chico Ten Cut in Great Barrington. I lied about how old I was. I said I was 15. I was 14. Don't tell them. But so I've been working in restaurants since I was young, and I was, like I think a lot of us do growing up in the Berkshires in particular. It's an entry-level job you can get. It's in the hospitality industry, and they'll take you when you're young, and you can be a food runner or a busser or whatever it is, help with dishes or prep. And so I loved that job. I always thought of it as the job I had to make money, but I also loved doing it. Like there is such a unique energy that comes in working in restaurants, whether it's front of house or back of house, or, whether you're a server or you're in the kitchen. And when I was in college, I've always worked in restaurants or bakeries or coffee shops in one way or another. When I was in college, I got a job at 4 and 20 Blackbirds, which is a women-owned bakery in Gowanus, Brooklyn, which Alice, you worked at as a baker. And I got the job because you and I I think the way I got that job was because you and I took the wrong bus on the way back from Red Hook from IKEA. And we ended up on the route that took us past the bakery. And you said, oh, let's get off of this bakery. And I was like, okay, great. And we went, and then you introduced me to the owners, and I ended up getting a job working for them. But I say this because when I graduated Barnard, I, was trying to think about what I was going to do. I knew I was pretty sure I wanted to work in art, and I had been interning for 2 years at Gagosian Gallery, and I was waiting to hear back on if I'd get a formal job offer for them. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. I was working still a few days a week at the bakery, and I was nannying in the Hamptons on the weekends, which was super fun. And I was living with Maddie. And I remember Maddie was working at this restaurant called Lavara. And, she started working there before I did, and she ended up having this great group of friends. And I remember hanging out with them, and in that way meeting the sous chefs of that restaurant. And they had mentioned that they were looking to hire some prep cooks. And I was like, oh, like I could take that job. Like that's a great job I could take while I wait to hear back from this serious art job. Like, great, I'll do that. And I started working there as a prep cook a few days a week. And I loved it. Like I loved the energy of it. I loved sort of how fast paced it was. I loved that it felt really challenging. Like it's like one of those things where nothing, you can work super hard and you can try to set everything up perfectly, but something almost always goes wrong. And for some reason that really appealed to me, that like, sort of like motivating. I'm pretty competitive, and I love this idea that like, okay, just because I execute this recipe perfectly one day, it doesn't mean that tomorrow, the ingredient is slightly different, and it completely changes the profile, and I have to kind of think on my toes and find the solution for that. So I ended up loving it so much. I loved working with the chefs, chef owners. It was a small sort of mom and pop restaurant, but it's owned by Alex and Montero. And I learned so much from them. The kitchen was led by a woman, as Alex. And there are very few women-led restaurants, period. But that was, something that stood out to me too. And I just loved it so much that when Gagosian did reach out, I turned them down because I wanted to stay working as the prep cook in the kitchen. And that was a decision. That was a pretty significant decision to make. And I knew it. I also knew I do not understand that I studied art for 4 years and decided to just work as a prep cook. That was a huge moment to kind of realize that. But I also really did love what I was doing. And, I ended up working for them for, I think it was like over 4 years, but close to 5. And I ended up just sort of working my way up at Lavara. So first I was a prep cook, and then I became sort of one of the daytime sous chefs. And then I became, I gradually worked my way to overseeing operations with them. I ended up working as a line cook at night. I ended up bopping between the small group of restaurants that they had. So they had Lavara in Cobble Hill, which got a Michelin-star when I was there, which was super exciting. And then, we had Chiquito, there was El Quinto Pino, and then I helped them open up a 4th location in Cobble Hill too, called Taqua. And, it was something where I just really loved learning, and I loved the environment. In some ways, I didn't love all the ways, all the things about that environment. It was very brutal to work in, and I can tell you more about that. But in terms of just how I ended up working in what I work in, I really loved what I was doing, and sort of, I think, was given the opportunity from the people I worked with to, they knew I'd gone to Barnard. They knew that I, maybe could read or write, or that I could help them in certain ways that other cooks might not be as able to do. And I really loved having the opportunity to sort of find the ways that I could draw that background into the kitchen work. And I just sort of went from there.
So what are some of the things that, you mentioned some of the tough things about working in a kitchen. And I think that ties into some of the things that when we talked to prepare for this conversation, you mentioned as kind of like learning moments for you, or moments where you realized you could imagine a different way of organizing a kitchen. And that has led to your current work and your most recent work with the wing. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about those learning moments.
Of course, yeah. So, when I was working in the kitchen with Alex Nutter at Lavara, I was like one of the only women working there. There was one other woman who worked in the kitchen, but it was, as with most restaurants, a really male-dominated environment. And, for me, I thought that the way to survive in that environment, because it felt like survival, right? Like it's an environment that has lots of sexual harassment. There's a lot of gender discrimination. There's just plain out aggression and bullying. I've been locked in the walk-in enough times. I couldn't even tell you, sometimes really funny, sometimes not funny. And it's one of those things where I thought the solution for that was to sort of armor up, like be the hardest working, the toughest, sort of the just going to do it, like knuck if you buck, like just fists up, but like be the strongest and be the most, powerful in that way. And, I think that would sort of help me survive through it. And it did. And it was a successful way to get through that. It wasn't until I think later on when I started to work at a place like the Wing. And so, we're talking a series of a few years have passed. And so I've gone from working maybe more day to day in the kitchen and more into a role where I'm overseeing kitchen programs. I'm doing menu curation or supply chain. I oversee like a supply chain for a company, or I do menu development. I train people. And I learned that, I had the ability to help shape a kitchen culture and help make it an environment that I wished that I had coming up in, that I wanted to make a kitchen environment that felt safe and supportive, and that anyone could come into regardless of gender or regardless of ability or age or something like that, and still feel like they could just be a person at work and learn how to do the job and not feel like anything else got in the way of that. I was really motivated to want to create that set of circumstances. And what I thought about, and what I shared with you, Alice, is over the past couple of years, I've been learning a lot about psychological safety in a workplace environment, and thinking, work psychological safety specifically refers to, a climate where people really feel safe enough to take maybe interpersonal risks to speak up or share an opinion or sort of be themselves, or, talk through their concerns or questions or ideas and actually feel safe enough in an environment to do that, and psychologically safe enough to do that. And I was thinking of how can that be applied to a kitchen or to a restaurant or a hospitality business. And, I learned that, it's not leadership, or to me, leadership is not just about being the hardest working or the one who knows everything, or sort of the ego in the kitchen, or the only person, who's running the show, the real boss or having authority. But to me, it's also the ability, real leadership is that ability to create the environment or the culture whereby everyone can feel psychologically safe in that culture and environment. And, to me, true leadership is allowing myself to be vulnerable and bringing my whole self to work, not thinking that there's such a thing as like, oh, you have to be somebody different at work, but you can actually bring your lived experiences to work and have that be what guides you and what guides your team. That to me has really stood out and has, something I've thought through over time. I had to unlearn a lot of this idea that I had to be the toughest or the hardest working, or they're the longest, or they're be like the meanest. I had to unlearn a lot of that and understand that actually what I needed to do is be the person that creates the set of circumstances that allows everyone to really be their best selves and be able to grow and develop in their own career by feeling safe where they are. And that's something that actually in many ways reminds me of Berkshire Children's Chorus, which is maybe a funny circle back to make, but I think that the chorus is a really good example of a psychologically safe environment, right? Because first of all, you have to be vulnerable to be in a chorus. You are using your own voice. You are not using an instrument. There's nothing in way of in between you and the people around you. It's your own body and your own voice and your own self. And that can be really scary to do. That is not an easy thing to share. And it really is like an act of sharing, an act of generosity to be part of a chorus. But also a chorus really is a team, right? Like you actually, and you have to function as part of a whole, because if you don't, if the altos overpower the sopranos, then the music is off. Like it actually requires, and everyone's voice has to fit in to their specific singing part. Alice, if you're singing too strongly, that everyone's going to hear Alice. They're not going to hear the whole section that you're a part of. So for me, it's like thinking about, the timing and the pace and the pronunciation and all of that comes from the team's effort. And I think only by having an environment where you feel actually safe enough to be able to do that effectively, that's where a chorus gets sort of its really special thing. And so for me, if I think about it and I think now and reflect on it, I understood what safety could feel like, or what that could feel like by being in a chorus. And because I know that feeling, I can help try to approximate or get close to that feeling in the work cultures I establish for some of these really big companies or really big food and beverage programs.
So this idea of psychological safety in work and leadership, I feel like it's really something that people are talking about and aspiring to, especially like Me Too movement is kind of bringing this up. And the idea of fostering more women leaders is partially because there's kind of an idea that there could be a different style of leadership that women might bring. And I wondered if you could make it concrete for us a little bit and give us some examples of maybe, old habits that you overcame. I think you've given us some of those, but then maybe also some tips or ideas about how you have seen this different style of leadership play out, be successful, or even just how do you do it?
Yeah, I feel really fortunate to have met some really great leaders, and I've also met some really not great leaders. But I've had lately, I think the past, last year in particular, I had some really great leaders that kind of rooted the way that they led me in that idea of psychological safety, whereby, they made sure that I knew that I could really come to them with anything. I could disagree with them. I could, if I messed up, I could share that. I could, always feel like, I'm not at risk with them or with the job because something came up. And I think something I had to really unlearn is this tendency that I had is to be really defensive when in the past when a mistake came up, or to try to blame someone, or to, maybe be really reactive. I think in kitchens, it's very easy to be very reactive when something goes wrong. That's sort of the trope of chefs in the kitchen, throwing the pots and pans when something is wrong. That is a a thing that people identify and associate with kitchens. And I think that that's something I had to really work on. Like I have been the person in the kitchen that, you know, has not thrown a knife at anyone, but I've thrown a knife out of anger. I have done that. And like, I'm not, you know, Maddie's laughing, but like I have had moments where I've been really angry and tried to like outwardly show how macho and tough I was by doing something like that. And that's not good, and that is not healthy, and that's not what anyone should be striving to do or should be sort of encouraging in kitchen environments. The most effective leaders that I've had that have practiced psychological safety or sort of vulnerable leadership have been women. That's just been sort of my experience with it. There was the one person I worked for that really stood out, Brenna Stenger, who worked for the Wing and sort of had really concrete ideas about just what kind of work environment should be and how to help facilitate that by way of safety and leadership. And I think it's, forming relationships that are rooted in trust with the people you work with, your team, with one another. It is always creating a feedback loop, I would say. So like, feedback is really hard to get. It's really hard to give and receive. It's people have a really negative association with feedback, but feedback can be constructive and it can also be positive. And it should be something that is exchanged between your employee and your manager. It should be this really healthy loop. Like everyone can learn from one another by listening and by actually understanding maybe context around a situation that happened or, clarifying something that wasn't clear. Like I think there's a lot of ways in which psychological safety and that workplace environment comes from that communication and from two people's mutual agreement to be clear with one another. And to me, clear is kind. The clearer you can be, it's a kind act to be clear. So I don't know if that answered the question. I kind of went off on a spiral,
definitely.
But that's a little bit of how I feel about it, examples that I've had, and just, if I can think of any tips from the people I've worked for, it's that, being clear, being direct, and committing to giving feedback when feedback's necessary. And it can be positive and constructive. It can be both things.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of involves a shift in our thinking about what it means to have feedback. It's not just it's not a criticism. It's actually useful. Mm-hmm. That's something I've come across in kind of organizational development theory, like thinking about how can it be a learning organization where you value the feedback because it can help you all do better in the long run.
Exactly. I think it's really important, and it's something that people tend to have a really negative reaction to, but something that can make the organization better as a whole.
So I wanted to ask a little bit, because we didn't really hear too much about your time at the Wing and what you did in the last couple of years, which is really pretty incredible. So give us a little bit of a tour of your last couple of years.
Sure. So what I can do is I'll tell you after I left working for Lavara and that small restaurant group, I first went to like my little stepping stone to get to the Wing, which was Irving Farm. And Irving Farm is a coffee roasters. They have a roastery in Millerton, but they also have 9 locations. And so I was brought on to Irving Farm to be their executive chef and culinary director. And so I went from overseeing 4 locations for a restaurant to overseeing 9 and learning a little bit about, they were a more established business. They had sort of different, maybe more of a formal bureaucracy that you might see in a corporate company. I was in charge of overseeing the 9 kitchen teams, the menus, the supply chain of vendors that we worked with to deliver all the food, and all the different operations and logistics and processes that went into making sure that their cafe on the kitchen side, on the food side, ran every day. And so that was a real lesson for me in what it looks like to build a program that might be rooted in values and integrity and good food, but also has to operate at scale. It has to operate in a bigger way. And it has to be something where I can't be in the kitchen every day. That was a big learning curve because I went from working in a place where I was in the kitchens in one way or another every day. Irving Farm was the first place where I was still in the kitchens, but I wasn't in every location simultaneously. So I had to trust the teams to do the work, and I had to set them up to be able to do the work without me. And then from there, I got the job at the Wing, and I was the global food and beverage director for the Wing. And I oversaw all of their programs and all of their locations. I started working for the Wing when they just had 2 locations, but we grew it to 12. And so we had 2 locations in New York City. But by the end of my time at the Wing, we had locations in DC, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, Boston, several more in New York, and then also London in the UK. And so I got the experience of not just doing a scale up the way that I had with Irving, but doing a scale up on an international basis, like an international scope. So, if I thought I knew how to source vendors and operate a supply chain for New York, I had to really learn how to do it for a location that was in an entirely different city. It really tested my knowledge and understanding of health code compliance, because every city has slightly different ways that they handle health code. I had to really understand, how all these different teams would be quite different from one another. The team that was in Chicago was very different from the team in Los Angeles, or different from the one in the UK. For me, it was another really big lesson in, okay, how can I make this program, again, really values driven? The Wing is a co-working community space for women. So I wanted the menus to reflect that same idea, same concept, like how can all the ingredients be sourced from women-led small businesses? How can the employees working in the kitchens feel really supported as women in the industry? And how can we collaborate with chefs that are prominent women or up-and-coming women in their respective cities? And so, I had the chance to kind of build that out, but again, had to really make sure that the operations worked behind the scenes. And it was the first time I worked for a startup, and the first time I worked for a company that had, I had a lot of financial expectations, like business finances. I had to make sure that the costing mechanics were right. I was responsible for a lot of profit and loss reports. I was responsible for making sure that every decision I made was towards a goal of profitability for that specific program. So I learned a lot that way. And I had also a lot of fun getting to kind of travel around and open these kitchens, build them out. I did all the, design for the kitchens and for the cafes, making sure that all the equipment was spec'd properly and everything was, designed in the right way. And yeah, that was sort of where I was until April 3rd, when I was laid off because of COVID-19. Just like 400 of the people I worked with were laid off. It was a very big thing. I think co-working community spaces are certainly not COVID safe, nor are food and beverage or restaurants. And that's really what led me to Lunch Group.
Yes, that's what I wanted to ask you about. So I want to ask you about what you're doing right now. Then I want to save some time for question and answers. And I wondered if in there somewhere in the next couple minutes, you could weave in a little bit about kind of how your background in the arts and creative thinking, and also as a singer in BCC, how do you draw a line from your BCC singer self to here and now, but also what are you doing right now?
Right. So I will say, right now so when I was laid off on April 3rd, I had a pretty clear sense in looking around that I was not going to be able to find another job, maybe very close to what I was doing, or another job in restaurants or food and beverage for a while, because everything was really locked down. It still is in New York City. I had the sense that it was going to be difficult to just find a job in the same way that I might have in the past. So I decided to create a business called Lunch Group. And I wanted to set it up to be a consultancy, so operations, curation, and impact consultancy, because I figured that if I couldn't find a job that's a full-time sort of job the way I had, then maybe I could find contract work. So working as a consultant or a contractor for now, as I, figured things out. And I, always knew I wanted Lunch Group to sort of be a group. So I found a group of collaborators that I, love, that I've worked with, to kind of help with the work that we're doing. And I decided just to, just for operationally speaking, to set it up as an LLC and to kind of get everything kind of, working in the background so that I could really take on these kind of contracts. With Lunch Group, I really wanted, one, to not only be able to take on contracts easily, but also to think of how, sort of what I was talking about, how can a lot of these systems of service and hospitality be rethought and reimagined? I think specifically, because I started this in April, and then we had the George Floyd uprisings happen. And I was thinking also a lot about the experiences of Black and Brown or BIPOC individuals in our communities, and specifically in restaurants and in the work, and how, their experience of working in the kitchen or working in food and beverage or hospitality is really different from mine as a white woman. There's a lot of systems at play with service and hospitality that go back, especially in this country, to, a problematic history. And so I was thinking, how can the work that Lunch Group does help restaurants not only navigate this time with COVID, but also if we're completely shut down and everyone's closed and they have to reopen, how can some of this work, how can we help them move in a direction that is a bit more progressive, or that allows them to reimagine what kind of systems and structures they have in place with the way that they run their business, so that, again, it promotes psychological safety, that the workplace environment feels like a place everyone can be comfortable in, and that it starts to be much more inclusively minded, especially for the experiences of Black and Brown employees. So that was something I wanted to make as a goal for Lunch Group with the collaborators I work with, separate from just, taking on clients that need my help with ops or need my help with curation or whatever it might be. If I think about how that relates to, if I think about like maybe weaving a thread between sort of where I was with PCC and all the way to now, I think, there are so many overlaps when it comes to the creative work that I've done. I think, when I think about painting, I think about all the different sensory layers that go into making art for painting and how that relates to cooking. For sure, there's a lot of overlap there, just visually or just in sort of that skill set. If I think about the time I spent in theater or performing, I spend a lot of time talking to people. I spend a lot of time giving presentations or pitching or doing like negotiations with folks, and like being able to, I think, turn on my performance mind and do that and sort of, do that maybe more effectively is something that's always really informed the work I do. And I'm really happy to be in that position. I know a lot of people, often people I've worked with have told me that they would like to know how they can be as good as presenting as I can. And I always say it's because I did a lot of theater and because I sang and I performed, and that was all scary. And I got over those scary pieces then. And now I'm at a place where I can do that and feel less, I can talk you through this deck, no problem. That's not scary anymore. But, I think most of all, when I think about the way that I approach the work, like with Lunch Group, thinking of it as a group of collaborators or wanting to do the best by my teams to make sure they feel safe and that they can grow and develop themselves, that is the through line right to chorus. Again, like it's, I learned about what it feels like to be in that safe choral environment and with a group of people, and we are all safe with one another, to how I just want to make that be what it is to feel like to work in one of my kitchens, or what I want, people to feel like on one of my work teams, or just collaborating on something for Lunch Group. I want that same feeling. So if I think about all of that, I feel like absolutely my background in the arts and in the creative work shows up for me every day in what I do. And I think in the feeling of what I want to do, that's where chorus intersects.
You want to make a harmonious chorus of a team. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, so we have time now for questions. We also have the treat that we're going to share with everyone. So I'm going to put that into the chat, but I will do that while I turn it over to my sister Madeline to ask a question, because she indicated she had one.
Yes. Hi. So I might know the answer to this, but I still want to hear what you have to say. So Danielle, you are bilingual. You speak Spanish fluently, which is part of your, that's been part of your life forever. It's part of your family. But I know that by working in the kitchens, you got really fluent. But also I wanted to ask, because I remember we sang some pieces, you mentioned a couple of them in different languages, but I think we did sing a couple that were in Spanish. And I wanted you to talk about how singing choral pieces in different languages has had an effect on you, or what you think of it, and what its importance is to you.
That's a really good question. And I absolutely feel like the exposure to different languages was really important through, like, with what we sang through music. I mean, yes, I grew up hearing Spanish when I visited my grandmother's apartment in Washington Heights. And like, she had the news on sometimes in Spanish, and I certainly like had that exposure. And of course, really locked that down when I started working in kitchens full time. But when it comes to maybe not just Spanish, but other languages, and the exposure we had through the choral music, that is for sure one of the only ways that I, learned how to, put my mouth into the words for French, or like how to, learn. I feel like we did a song in like Swahili or something like that. Like, I feel like that was one, like I wouldn't have had exposure to that for sure. We did a song in Hebrew. And that was something I remember very vividly, Jana Laiz coming and telling us how to say this prayer in Hebrew, and us like really being focused on the pronunciation, because obviously the the pronunciation is just so important to the meaning. And so, you know, it's something that I think absolutely opened up my worldview in terms of, you know, the sentiment and feeling and emotion behind these different words. It almost humanized them more. I think when you sing a piece of music, you really feel what you're singing. And, you know, more so than I think you feel just maybe taking a language class. Like maybe you can, like in conversation, learn that too. But certainly getting a crash course in some of these languages through music and through the music we were taught absolutely changed my perspective and view on just a lot of things in the world.
And it might have helped develop that ear, your ear, you know, singing. I think that for me, one of the reasons that I was able to succeed with languages, the ones that I studied, was because I had an ear for music, and it actually helped me with my language skills as well, because I was just able to listen in a different way.
Yeah, definitely.
So do we have any more questions right now? Or we could look at the treat. If you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand or unmute yourself. I see Ellen Maggio has a question.
Hi, Ellen.
I'll unmute you.
Yeah, unmute.
Hold on. Unmute you. There you go.
Yeah. I know this is such a hard time for anyone at any age, because we don't know what our near future is going to hold. But do you have a, oh, you get to hear my oven timer. Do you have, what do you think's next? You've moved so rapidly through all these phases and have learned so much. Do you have an idea of what comes next, or maybe you don't?
I think that's a great question. I feel like with this moment in time is really challenging because it's very uncertain. Like I, you know, don't know in what way I can plan like a year from now. Like, is that an effective way, you know, to think about time? I think that, you know, for me, I've been thinking like smaller periods of time. Like, what am I going to do through the end of this year? What are my goals for myself or for Lunch Group through into next year, into 2021 and so forth? You know, I think for sure, I want to keep doing the work that I love to do. So related to food and beverage, absolutely, but certainly anchored in, you know, how I can be a part of a community, help build a community, how I can, you know, as much as possible use, if I have a platform and the opportunity to use a platform, use it to uplift and support other people and their voices and work. I know I am always really inspired by values-driven work or work that makes an impact in a business or in, you know, within a certain group of people. And so I know I definitely want to do and keep pursuing work in that. I think for me, there's certainly an urgency around how to support the restaurant industry right now. I'm very, you know, concerned of what it's going to look like, you know, specifically in New York City. You see restaurants already closing, like what that's going to look like as we go through the winter. You know, I would hate a world where the only restaurants that survive are very big chains because the smaller ones can't make it work financially. So, you know, in any way that I can do work that supports the restaurant industry right now and help them get through it, re-envision the work they do, re-strategize the work they do, that's going to be important to me. But, you know, I think I am looking forward to building on the work that I've done over the next period of time in whatever way that is. But yes, it is a very hard time to plan things.
Do we have any other questions, especially from some of our recent graduates of the chorus or current singers? All right, I'll let you think about it. I'd love to hear some more questions. You can just let me know in the chat, or you can also just turn up and unmute yourself. But while we're waiting for more questions, why don't we talk about the takeaway that you prepared for us, Danielle?
Yeah, absolutely. So when Alice asked me to do a takeaway, I wanted to share a recipe because I thought that would be special and important. And what I did is I shared the Matos family black bean recipe. My mom and my dad can see, but I adapted it to be from a can because this was something I did for COVID. You know, everyone bought a ton of canned beans, or at least maybe not everyone. I certainly bought a ton of canned beans here in Brooklyn. And so I wanted to find a way to adapt my grandmother, I guess maybe even my great grandmother, this recipe? Like, I don't know, mom, dad, nod there. And adapt it to be something that works with canned beans. So I wanted to share that. It is a recipe that we have a handwritten version of it that was definitely my grandmother's, Adeline Matos. My sister and I called her Mom. So I shared that recipe for sure, because it's something that, you know, to me, that recipe is something we grew up eating. It's something that my, you know, family always had at big holidays, but it was also something that my mom would make a version of it for us to have actually at Coda or on the way to Coda in between after school and Coda. My mom, and I know other friends of mine experience this too, having like rice and beans and green peas as our dinner before Coda. So I wanted to share that because I thought it was something that was special and related to my experience at Chorus. And then I also, Alice asked for 5 beans of wisdom to share. So at the end of the recipe, I wrote 5 beans of wisdom, which I was thinking, first of all, I love that they're beans, but also that I was thinking about, you know, thinking about the past, you know, maybe 12 years from when I left Chorus to now, and the things that have been things that I've learned that maybe surprised me along the way, or that I didn't think would be true for me necessarily in some aspects. So I can share those, and if anyone thinks of other questions, drop them in the chat. But so I put the first one as be kind and be your whole self. You know, it sounds, and some of these might sound really saccharine or sort of ridiculous, but I really mean it. Like, it's so important to be kind and empathetic to the people around you. You know, and like I said, with psychological safety, bringing your whole self to work, like you are a combination of your experiences. You don't have to change that. Like, I really don't believe in leaving it at the door. I think that's a really one-sided way to think of it, or one-dimensional. Like, if you are upset and you have something upsetting happening to you, like you can bring that in, like, and we can talk about that, we can work through that, and then you sharing that might make it easier for you to move through your day versus trying to hide it and suppress that. True leadership, second is true leadership is creating the environment and space so that every single person can feel seen, valued, heard, and safe. And so that's the psychological safety piece. So for me, you know, taking the time to really listen to those around you, to trusting their perspectives, especially if those perspectives are different from yours or maybe challenge parts of yours. I think it's important to listen and hold the space for that. Like, I think that's a very important thing to do as a leader and with your team. Building relationships and communities. So for me, when growing up, when I heard like the word networking, I thought it was always sort of like a really silly business casual, like martini in a lobby kind of conference thing. I didn't understand that it's actually about your friendships and building like relationships with people you work with, and having you know, people you work with are sometimes the people you spend the most time with. And you know, I didn't understand until later that those relationships not only become your community, but those relationships open up a lot of opportunities for you later. A lot of the opportunities I have actually come because I had a good relationship with someone in one job and they've connected me to a new one, or because I had a friendship and that friend worked at a place, and then I got to know and the owners and started to work at that place too. And so, you know, that's something that's really stood out. And what's more, that you'd be surprised by how open people are, even people you think are sort of your idols or heroes or sort of leaders that you think are untouchable. You'd be surprised at how open those people are to talking to you, and just if you just want to get to know them. I think people are very receptive if you send them a message or a note. I've had people send me DMs and I've ended up talking to them and getting to know them, and that's gone really well. And so I always encourage you, like, you can DM your heroes, you can email your heroes, and you'd be surprised by how open people are just to talking to you, especially if you're not going into it with like an ask, like hire me. You're going into it like, hey, I really like what you do. I just want to learn how you do it. And that's a really powerful moment. Taking care of yourself is really important. That's my 4th bean. And that's something that I have not been very good at in the past, just by way of working myself really hard. Again, like thinking that the only way to get ahead or be a leader was being the one who went in the earliest and stayed the latest. And I learned that that's not at all the case. To be the most effective, you actually need to be taking care of yourself. You need to be able to set boundaries around your time and be able to trust people that are also there to do the work. And you don't have to be the only one to put it all on your shoulders. You can, you know, really help people grow and learn and develop by trusting them to do the work and not trying to do it all yourself. And then lastly, that you can really build what you're set your mind to build, which again is one that maybe seems really hokey and silly, but I found, like, for example, I wanted to set up an LLC, and I just looked up how to do that, and I went through the steps to do that, and then I did that. And I think there's something really special. Like, I didn't real, like no one's going to give you the sort of go for it card. You kind of have to do that yourself, to take ownership over the things you want to do. I used to think that the way the world worked was that like somebody official with their official hat will come and tell me, go do it. And then that was how I would get to do it. And that's not true. You shape the things for yourself that you want to do. And you take ownership over the things you want to do. And that's on you and, you know, your own drive. So I will tell you that now, because that's an important takeaway that I learned. No one will give it to you. You need to figure out the way to kind of take ownership over it yourself and your own goals. And you will probably fail along the way. Everyone fails along the way, but that's also important. And taking risks, there are failures, but that's fine because you'll learn from those, and that will make you all the stronger for the next thing that you pursue and do. So those are my 5 beans. They're at the end of this beans recipe. Yes, we'd love to hear your beans. If you have a bean, this recipe's on, it has my email on it, so you can send me an email. But anything at all, we'd always here to support and listen. If any of you are sort of thinking about what you're going to do next or going to school, I'm always happy to sort of be a soundboard and listen to you and help you think about it too. That's, again, make good on my promise. You absolutely are welcome to do that. Don't feel shy about it. And yeah, that's my little takeaway for y'all.
So we have, okay, thank you so much. And we're going to be sending all of that. We're going to send that document out by email also. So I put it in the chat, but I'll send it out by email after the event. And we're probably going to run a couple minutes over time, but I think that's all right. We're having fun here and we have a couple more things we want to do. So before we close out, we have some questions from some choristers. One is from Mary. I'm going to let her ask herself. And then I have one from Bella as well. So Mary, do you want to go and take it away?
Yeah. Hi, Dani. I remember you talking about earlier about how you like would build menus for the restaurants, and I was wondering if there's any like certain meals from growing up that you really incorporated or like twisted to make your own that you put on the menus, or if there's any like of your favorites that you just kind of, yeah.
That's a great question. I really love that. I will say that this recipe I shared with everyone, I have put some version of this recipe on a lot of the menus that I have built. So like I've made it into a soup. I've made it into like something that gets added to something else. Like, so that's something for sure. It's one of my favorite recipes to bring into things. I also, I love to think about, growing up in the Berkshires, we're really lucky, obviously, to be around such great farms and such great ingredients. And so I think that's for sure been something I've always carried with me in the menus that I make, is like super ingredient focused or super farm focused, or who I'm getting it from. That's really important to me, is like, who is making this? I love to do some of my favorite dishes that I've made. Like I've loved to put things on the menu that to me are kind of fun and nostalgic, like, figuring out the way to make like a BLT, but making the best version of a BLT because we're making our own mayo and we're getting the best bacon and the best bread. And like, that's something that's really satisfying to me, is like, how can I tap into something that's personal to me, or like a memory or something I grew up having, and find the way to make that really sort of special or perfect for whatever the menu or whatever the restaurant is that I'm making it for, if that makes sense. But I really like that question. That's a good one.
So I think Bella had a question and I'm going to ask it for her. She asked, do you have any advice for current BCC members? I feel like so many things I'd like to say. I think the biggest thing I would say to current BCC members is to, I won't say one thing, but I would say be really open to sort of the experiences that are happening around you. And also, be really playful with it. That might bite me in the butt because I feel like Nancy's listening now, and I often got written up for being disruptive during chorus. That was a constant report card note, was that like, she's an A, but she's talks too much. But I think having a sense of play is really important, and having fun with what you're doing is really important, and that comes out, and like being able, to not only commit to it and take it seriously, but also have a sense of like enjoyment and joy with it. I think that's something that I would say to a current chorus member. And to not, for me, I think I am a Virgo and I like to plan things. So I am a bit structured and rigid, but I am also someone who feels like, in many ways, if I think about my choices over the past years,
went with it and went with the flow and kind of went with things as they were presented to me and decided just to take the risk and see how it felt and if I liked it or didn't, or, whatever it is. And so I would say, be open to taking those risks and to kind of trying something that might be a little different for you and seeing if you like, and if you don't, that's fine. You don't have to do it. But if you do, that could open up a lot of really exciting things too. So I think my biggest advice was that sense of openness and preserving that sense of play in your life.
That's great. And that didn't make it onto the list of beans, but maybe it could be a sixth bean.
Sixth bean, yes. Although you do run the risk of report card notes.
Yes.
I will say, for disruptive behavior.
Well, this has been really fun and really, really nice to have you, Danielle. Thank you so much for your time.
Of course. It's so nice to be here. I feel so lucky to get to be with so many wonderful people and so many people that I love too in the same Zoom room. It's a real treat.
Shout out to all of our alumni who are here. I see Rory joined, and hello, Nancy, who is our founding artistic director. And we have got to have some kind of alumni get together soon with you.
Okay. It'll be fun.
So just to finish up here, we want to thank you all for being here and for supporting the Berkshire Children's Chorus and for being in the Berkshire Children's Chorus. And we hope to have more events like this coming fall in the next couple months. If you have ideas for an event like this that can be helpful and useful to choristers, please let us know. You can reach us at the email that you signed up with. I think my email is connected, but we're going to send an email with all this information after the event. And you can also support the chorus. So if you go to berkshirechildren'schorus.org/donate, you can support our work. And we are going to need community support to make it through until we can all sing again, because our usual ways of being have been disrupted. And so please stay in touch with all of us and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and remember that you can reach out to all of us. You can reach out to me. I'm a board member. You can reach out to Dani if you want to talk about anything she's talked about today, and don't hesitate.
Anything at all.
So thanks, everybody. I think that wraps it up. And this has been a real pleasure.
This is so nice. Thank you all for having me. And I hope you have a really great rest of your evenings. And anything at all, would be happy to help. Thank you, Camilla. Would I be interested in joining the BCC board? I was a board member at one point, but was very busy. But anything at all you need, here to help. And it was such a joy to get to spend time with y'all.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording. We can all log off or chat or whatever we want to do.